Hi everyone. Today's lab is looking at muscles of the forearm. So we are in our forearm, wrist, and hand section of the 3D real-time and primal pictures. And to get going, I chose this view to start with, but you could also start up at anterior and posterior forearm for the two sides, and that would be fine too. We're going to start with anterior today. Okay, so I'm just going to flip this guy over and straighten him out. All right, so let's zoom in a little and move it up. There we go. All right, so I am going to remove some of the ligaments and connective tissue so that we can see the muscles and tendons themselves. So there are a lot of muscles in the forearm that are leading into the hand, and they can be tricky to remember, but we have a few tips. So first is they're very notably organized into layers, and that's how we'll look at them today. So certainly when you're studying them, I would do so layer by layer. Start superficially, then reflect those, look at the next layer, and so on and so forth. You'll also notice that a lot of the names for the forearm muscles are very descriptive of their location and their action, okay? So as we go through, you'll see that's the case. So we're going to start on the anterior forearm, okay? Making note of where the thumb is, so that's going to be lateral. So you would be looking at a left forearm and hand here. And what we're going to do is start on the thumb side at the most superficial level with this guy, pronator teres. Okay, so we are going to start with a clump of muscles, the superficial group of anterior forearm muscles, all of which are originating here, medial epicondyle of the humerus. Okay, so we'll start with pronator teres, which is just coming down to here. Let's remove everyone here so that you can see the insertion. We're getting there. Here you go. Okay, you can see that pronator teres kind of wraps over around the radius. Okay, which means its action is going to be mainly pronation. That's going to be its primary action because it'll grab that radius and sort of turn the forearm this way. Okay, pronation. As we move medially, we see flexor carpi radialis. Okay, flexor carpi radialis is coming right down here. And again, let's remove a few of these smaller muscles so that we can get a better look at it. Okay, so flexor carpi radialis. So this one is telling you all about its location and its function, okay? So it does wrist flexion. Carpi means wrist, and radialis means it's on the radial side as opposed to the ulnar side. Okay. And you can see its insertion there. I know there's still a lot of stuff on top of it. So even though it appears quite superficially, as it crosses the wrist, there's a lot of tendons here. So it's a little more difficult to see that insertion. Let's just get rid of a bunch of stuff here. There you go. Okay. So here we go, coming down to all the way into the second and third metacarpal. Okay, so flexor carpi radialis, and I'm actually going to add everything back because now we're missing some things that we need. So let's do that. There we go. All right. So where were we? We did pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis. The next one over is palmaris longus. Okay, so palmaris longus has a very long, thin tendon, okay? Palmaris longus is a muscle that not everyone has, and some people even have it in one arm but not the other, okay? So you can tell if you have it by holding your palms up, touching your thumb and your baby finger to each other, and then flexing your elbow against a force. So push down on the hand and while the hand pushes up, and you should see two tendons stick up. The one closest to the thumb is flexor carpi radialis. The next one over is palmaris longus. So you can see if that palmaris longus is missing if you are evolved. Palmaris longus is going to insert into the palmar aponeurosis, which is a broad tendon in the hand that we've removed here. Well, let's see if we can get it back. Oh, there we go. So it kind of looks like that. Okay, palmar fascia, palmar aponeurosis. So palmar fascia is fine. As we continue to move medially, we have flexor carpi ulnaris, and you can see the origin is quite broad here. Okay, so it is originating on the humerus like the other muscles, but also over here on the ulna, and it's going to come down on the ulnar side. Okay, inserting down there at the pisiform and base of the fifth metacarpal here. Okay, so flexor carpi ulnaris. As a reminder, you don't need to remember origins and insertions for the lab. You just need to be able to identify the muscles. So don't worry about the detail while you're here. However, it of course does help you to prepare for the lecture test where you do need to know some of that detail. All right, so we are going to remove this superficial layer. And what's underneath is what we often call the intermediate layer. And that's composed of a single muscle, the flexor digitorum superficialis, okay? So that tells you that it does wrist flexion and flexion of the digits. Digitorum means it goes to the digits. Superficialis means there's probably a deeper one, and there is, okay? So very, very large, broad muscle, and you can see the tendons going to each of the 4 digits, not the thumb. Okay, let's get some of this stuff out of the way because I want to show you the insertion. It's really interesting. Okay, so flexor digitorum superficialis is in orange, and you can see that as we get into the digits, the tendons divide, okay? And each one is going to go to the side of the middle phalanx, okay? And then through the middle, you have another tendon appearing, and that's our next muscle. So I'm going to get rid of flexor digitorum superficialis, and then beneath we have flexor digitorum profundus. So profundus means deep, and you can see that these tendons go all the way to the distal phalanx. So they go a little further. Let's zoom out and see the muscle belly. So here's your flexor digitorum profundus. You can see that it's much more medial versus the superficialis was very central, okay? But again, going to each digit. So that's how you'll tell the two apart. Next to that, more laterally, we have flexor pollicis longus. Pollicis means the thumb, okay? So you can see that it's going to cross the wrist, and that tendon is going all the way to the distal phalanx of the thumb, okay? So flexor pollicis longus. All right, we're gonna get rid of these two. We have one more anterior muscle underneath, and that is pronator quadratus. Called so because its action is pronation of the forearm, quadratus because it's square-shaped. Okay, so this is a nice, easy one to identify. All right, let's flip around to the back and have a look at the posterior forearm muscles. So again, we are going to start laterally, okay? And the first thing we'll do actually is get rid of this one. So brachioradialis we spoke about in the last module. Okay, because its big action is elbow flexion. So we talked about that one in the last module. So away it goes. So our first of the extensor group, or the posterior group, is actually kind of right on the side, on the radial side, and that's extensor carpi radialis longus. Okay, so that tells you it's an extensor. Carpi means it acts at the wrist. Radialis means you'll find it on the radial side. And longus means there's a long and a short, okay? So extensor carpi radialis longus, and you can see the tendon there going to the second metacarpal. Next to it is extensor carpi radialis brevis, okay? So brevis means short, all right? So same action, similar location, and you can see that the tendons are very close together. So there's your radialis longus. Okay, going to the second metacarpal. The tendon of radialis brevis goes to the third metacarpal. Okay. Our next muscle is extensor digitorum. So extensor digitorum is your big extensor of digits 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you can see that the orange tendons here kind of get cut off as you get towards the phalanges. And the reason for that is that these tendons actually insert into something called the extensor expansion, which we won't be showing in labs. You won't be tested on it in labs, but you should just be aware that it's there. And this is a big, broad fascia component that covers the 4 digits. So all the tendons on this extensor side, the posterior side, are going to insert into this extensor expansion, okay? And that's how it's going to act on the digits. So that's extensor digitorum. And as we move a little further, we get this guy that I'm actually going to remove. So this is a bit of a extensor digiti minimi, is often grouped together with extensor digitorum, and it's just a little offshoot that goes only to the 5th digit. We're considering it as just part of extensor digitorum for our purposes. So we're actually going to just leave it, okay? So you don't have to know extensor digiti minimi is a separate muscle. Our most medial muscle in this group is extensor carpi ulnaris, okay? So it's an extensor, it's for the wrist, and it's on the ulnar side, and you can see it's coming down to the 5th metacarpal. All right, so we're going to now get rid of this group, okay? If we were doing dissection, we would call that reflecting the muscles, and go down to our next layer. So we're going to start right up near the elbow here with anconius, kind of a triangular shaped muscle right on the posterior of the elbow. And anconius is going to help the triceps brachii, which you can see right there, with extension of the elbow. Then we move over just a little to supinator, okay? And you can see supinator is attaching here to the ulna and the humerus, and it wraps all the way around the radius. So when it grabs it, it's going to pull the arm in this direction, which is supination, okay? So that's supinator. Then we're going to move down to a group that's dedicated to the thumb, okay? So first up is abductor pollicis longus, meaning it abducts the thumb and it's long. The abductor brevis is a really short, tiny muscle, which we're not covering in lab. It's right there, okay? And I do want to show you the attachments. So let's get rid of these guys. So these are your thenar muscles in here, for those of you who are interested. So there's our abductor pollicis longus, okay? So you can see it's really wrapping around to the front. There we go, or to the anterior side, and attaching at the base of the 1st metacarpal, okay? So abduction, meaning it's going to pull the thumb in this direction, okay? As we move medially, we have extensor pollicis, there we go, extensor pollicis brevis and extensor pollicis longus. Let's get the highlights away. So extensor pollicis brevis, brevis meaning shorter, is going to run very close to abductor pollicis longus. You can see their tendons are right next to each other here, okay? And it's coming down here, okay, to the proximal phalanx of the thumb. The extensor pollicis, longus, there we go. The muscle belly starts up a little higher than brevis, okay? And then the tendon goes a little further. So that's why it's longest, because it is a longer muscle, and it's going all the way to the distal phalanx of the thumb, okay? All right, what else is on our list? Oops, there we go. Extensor indicis is our last, extensor indicis is our last muscle in this lab, and it is doing what it tells you it's doing. It's going right to your index finger, okay? Again, it's cut off, and that's because it'll insert into that extensor expansion we talked about. This one, very easy to identify because it's only going to that index finger and nowhere else. That's it for today. We'll see you next time.